Episode 3 starts out with Dr. Klimt describing to the audience how exactly Snowpiercer works, painting a picture that Snowpiercer is really set up to keep every social class apart. And if you want to get further up the cars, you have to trade up to do so. Where for everybody, the goal is to eventually get to first class, but the game is rigged to keep first class really far away from second class. Melanie spends that morning addressing her crew with a, quote, message from Mr. Wilfred, because the last 48 hours have been tough and it's encouraging them to just keep plugging forward. And in that speech, Commander Gray noticed that he paraphrased Churchill, which Melanie says, "I'll let him know that you noticed." And he says, well, let him know that there's unrest brewing. With the murders and the Taily uprising, people are getting concerned. And she says, to that point, Mr. Wilfred is suggesting that we ease the mind of passengers. She then turns to Ruth and asks, can you move the fight night from next week to tonight? And then she asks Commander Gray to take control of the matter. And the fight night is a big deal because the winner of the fight is going to get an immediate boost from third class to second class. Melanie then goes to deal with Andre, who is sleeping in his cell and having a dream about the night that Zara left the Tailies. And you find out that Zara just couldn't deal with the lifestyle of the Tailies anymore. And even though she didn't know what the night car was, she was willing to take the chance just to get out of the tail. And right before she left, Andre ended up giving her his wedding ring, saying, take this, you can use it as a trade. But as she was leaving, she was getting crap from everybody calling her a sellout. You don't get any more of the dream because he's woken up by two guards who put a bag over his head and take him to a room with Roach and Melanie. Roach lets him know that if he tries to communicate with the tail again, he's going to stick his head out of one of those holes. Andre then asks, can I speak to the witness of the first murder? And they tell him, no, that's not possible. Nikki's not awake yet. She's still unconscious. He then asks, okay, well, what was Sean Weiss informing Mr. Wilfred on? And Roach lets him know that Sean was keeping tabs on the black market and letting them know about this new drug that is wreaking havoc in the upper cars called Chronol. And Andre laughs because that drug isn't new to the tail at all. It's been around for 2 rotations. And that comes as a pretty big surprise to both Roach and Melanie. Andre says, if you're looking for Chronol, just look for Osweiler the brakeman. I mean, if you give him a blowjob, he'll give you Chronol. And that's another thing that catches them by surprise. So that's what Roach and Andre do. They go talk to Blowjob Boy, and he's caught off guard in the dining car, and he immediately says he had nothing to do with Sean's death. And while that's very reassuring to them, they really want to know who his supplier is, but he says, I don't have a supplier. I was just taking confiscated Chronol, and the only person I gave it to was that woman in the tail who got her arm froze off. But right after Roach and Andre leave, Osweiler is grabbed by a couple of the janitors and taken to meet with a guy named Terrence. And Terrence wants to know what they wanted, and he says, well, they wanted my supplier, but I didn't say anything. And Terrence is wondering how Andre was able to go from a murder to looking for Chronol. And Osweiler says it's because he's smart. I mean, I really wouldn't underestimate this guy. And Terrence says, oh, don't worry about that. We'll give that cop a nice warm welcome. And then he kicks Osweiler out. Now, after meeting with Osweiler, Roach wants to go talk to Zara, even though Andre has told him that she had nothing to do with it. But he figures that there must have been something that Sean told her, but there wasn't. She says he never mentioned drugs. I mean, the closest he came to it was saying that he knew a guy who could get him anything he wanted. But even then, she doesn't have a name. Now, while Zara was getting interrogated, a few people in first class are a little bit concerned, and they're seeing through the fight night and the games as just a distraction from Mr. Wilfred from what's really going on in the train. And one woman in particular, a woman named Lila, who has voiced her displeasure before and just seems like a real pain in the ass, tells Ruth this, and Ruth says, well, yeah, no, it is a distraction, but it's an entertaining distraction. And they're worried because while they've accepted the fact that this isn't a pleasure cruise, they feel like their fortunes have built this train, and now they're not safe because Mr. Wilfred has lost control of the train. I mean, we're talking first-class problems. And after they're done interrogating Zara, Roach breaks for lunch, and as he's eating, Andre's asking him about his marriage and if he had any kids, and you learn that he did have 3 kids, but 2 of them just didn't make it. And Andre feels like he can relate because he felt that loss when Zara went up train. He then asks Roach if he ever met Mr. Wilfred, and he says, yeah, I shook his hand a few times before we departed, but now he just speaks through Melanie. The two are interrupted by Till, who spent the morning with her girlfriend Jinju and learned from Jinju that Nikki isn't unconscious. She's actually awake, just not doing very well. And Till feels like she needs to solve this murder because she's the reason why Nikki is even in the drawers to begin with. Although Jinju warns her, do not cross Melanie, it's not a good idea. But with this information, she goes to Roach and Andre, and Roach, who is still on his lunch break, sends Andre and Till to go figure out what's going on with Nikki. Now, unbeknownst to them, Jinju has realized that she kind of screwed up during that pillow talk, so she gets in contact with Melanie, who is currently getting an update on the hole in the cattle car. And it's getting fixed, but at a very slow rate. And she's starting to get concerned because she can't keep pumping heat down there while these guys fix it. And Ben even suggests, hey, why don't we just get rid of the tail? But she doesn't want to go with that option just quite yet. So when she gets Jinju's call, she's a little stressed out, and Jinju says, hey, you don't want the investigators to see Nikki the way she is, right? Because I'm pretty sure that's where they're headed. And Till and Andre have arrived in Nikki's room to find her in really bad shape. And when Andre looks in her mouth, he sees all this black stuff and knows right away that it was Cronol. All the while, the doctor is reassuring them that this is completely normal, but she was under for so long, she looks in this rough shape, it's kind of hard to buy that. And the group is interrupted by Melanie, who has arrived and tries to break it up, saying they're not supposed to be here, they need to leave. And both Till and Andre think that this is very, very fishy. Till then asks if the drug that they use to put people to sleep is some kind of Cronol. And Andre says, well, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe Cronol is a variation of that drug. And Melanie asks the doctor, that's not even possible, is it? But it is possible, and it's the truth. And this causes the doctor to come clean that Cronol is a street version of the drug that they use to put people to sleep. And a courier comes and grabs the drug from him, and in return, he gets stuff that he can use to help the sleepers that Mr. Wilfred just didn't think of. Stuff to help their bed sores, things like that. Andre then notices Miles' hair in a bag and freaks out and demands to know where Miles is. So they take him to Miles, who is flourishing in a classroom. He couldn't be any happier. He's got a bed. He's doing great in school. And Miles is really thriving in the internship. But their meeting doesn't last long, and Miles goes in for a hug and tells him he's keeping his eyes open. But now that he's seen Miles, Andre wants to go and talk to Josie and give her an update on Miles because she's got to be worried sick about him. But Melanie doesn't allow it, telling him that Till can get her a message and you'll be able to see Josie once you figure out this murder. Honestly, we can't even get down Carr anyway because of the fight night. And Andre says, well, fight night is a great time to see some janitor who's slinging drugs. So that's where Till and Andre head. They head right to the night car where they're hosting the fight night. And the first class passengers are watching it from above in the balcony, and they've noticed the arrival of Andre. And it just so happens on that night that one of the fighters is a janitor, so all the janitors are watching this go down. So the fight kicks off, and Till watches the janitors while Andre goes to talk to Zara because he feels like Zara isn't going to tell him anything with brakemen breathing down his neck. And that was a pretty good hunch because it was dead on. Because when they get alone, she tells him that the one janitor over there is Terrence, and that was Sean's Cronol hookup. Andre wants to meet with him, but Zara says there's always a price with Terrence. She then takes off his wedding ring that he gave her and tells him how she sold her wedding ring, but she always kept his. And maybe he can use it in a trade with Terrence. So Zara is able to get a message to Terrence, but Terrence doesn't show up. Instead, it's Osweiler. And Osweiler lets him know that Terrence can't risk being seen talking to Andre. But Andre reiterates that he needs to talk to Terrence. So get out there and tell him that I need a meeting with him. Now, during all of this, Nikki, who has woken up in her hospital bed, has made it out because they're siphoning electricity and the lock on the door wasn't working for a little bit. And she's made it into the night car and is watching the fight. And Till has noticed her and is trying to get her back to her room. But LJ, Lila's daughter, has also noticed her and is pointing her out, saying to everybody, look, that's the girl who was arrested for murder. What's she doing here? So Till's priority right now is to get Nikki back to her room. Andre, on the other hand, doesn't have to wait much longer to meet with Terrence. Terrence sends somebody to grab Andre, and they go to a private area in third class where the two can talk. Terrence tells Andre that he had nothing to do with Sean's death. But he does ask, how much does Mr. Wilfred know about the Cronol problem? And Andre says very little. In fact, I think if I solve this murder, he's just going to forget the whole thing, and they all have a good laugh about that. Terrence goes on to explain that the night that Sean was killed, he saw him with a guy from first class. Guy with a shaved head who takes care of himself. And the guy he's describing is a guy named Eric, who is always standing behind LJ. Right before he leaves, he tells Terrence that he just needs one more thing, and he pulls out the ring and trades for it. He then heads back down to the night car, and he tells Roach and Melanie that he has a description of the guy, but is unwilling to give it until he can go talk to Josie. So they give in. They allow him to go talk to Josie, and Andre gives her an update on Miles, but he also tells her how he saw Zara, and he's had it wrong this entire time. He just couldn't see the great thing in front of him. And then he kisses her. But when he does so, he passes something to her, and that thing was a small implant that allows people to get from car to car. And that was the thing that he traded his ring for with Terrence. He's then forced to give the description of Eric, and Eric has had a busy night because after seeing Nikki, he showed up outside of her room, killed the soldier that was guarding the door, killed the doctor, and then pulled up a chair and said, Nikki, you don't remember me, do you? But you do know who I am. Thank you for watching this recap. If you do not see the next one up in the corner right there on the end screen, don't worry, it'll be up shortly. Please consider following the channel. That'd be cool. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you don't, there's a thumbs down button for a reason.